Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to start to work on the client details component. Okay, we want to be able to click on this button here and it'll bring us to show more of John Doe's information. And we'll also be able to edit his balance and stuff like that. So what I'll do is go to app.module.ts. Let me just close all this stuff out here, because we need to create a route, right? So let's see, app.module.ts. And we're already bringing in the client details component right here. We just need to add a route for it. So let's put a comma here, and we're going to add a path. And this path is going to be client slash and then colon ID, because this is going to be basically a placeholder. This is the ID parameter. Whatever client we want to view, the ID should go in here in the URL. All right, and then we're going to link it to the component of client details component. All right, so let's save that, and then let's go to our clients component where we have the table. Go to the HTML, and this is the link right here. Let me just toggle this soft wrap or toggle word wrap. So this link here, we want to add a router link, right? Now, since we have to include the ID or the key, then it's going to be dynamic. So router link is going to have brackets around it. We're going to say router link. All right, and then we're going to set it to a value with brackets, and then it's going to be slash client slash and then the ID or the key. So we're going to just concatenate here with a plus sign client dot client dot money sign key. And I think that should be good. So let's save it. Let's go back and let's click on details, and now client details work. So we're now loading the component. You can see we have the ID up in the URL. So now what we're going to do is open up the client details component TS file, and we're going to do some stuff here. Okay, so let's bring in stuff we need. So let's bring in the client service. We're obviously going to need that. Okay, whoops, that should be client service, and that's going to be from, and we want to go outside and then outside again into services slash client dot service. Okay, we're also going to be using flash messages, so we might as well bring that in now. So we want to bring in the flash message service, and that's going to be from Angular 2 dash flash dash messages. Spelled that wrong. Flash message, it should be messages service. All right, and then we also want to bring in some stuff from the router. So let's say import, and of course we want router. We also want something called activated route, and this has to do with getting the ID parameter. We also want to bring in something called params, and those are all going to come from the Angular router. Just like that. Let's also bring in our client model. That'll be from models slash client. Okay, so we get all our imports. Now we're going to have to add all the dependencies in the constructor. So let's go inside here, and we're going to add, let's say, private client. Actually, we'll do public client service. Set that to uppercase C, client service. All right, let's do public router. Set that to router. Let's do public route, and that's going to be set to activated route. And then finally we want our flash messages, so we'll say public flash messages and set that to flash messages service. Actually, let's make this flash messages service as well. Okay. So let's add a couple properties. So we're going to have the ID, which will be a string. We're going to have the client, which will be the type of client coming from our model. We're going to have has balance, which will be a Boolean, and I'll show you why we do that in a little bit. But I'm going to set that to false. And then we also want show balance update input, which is also a Boolean and set to false. Okay, so those are our properties. Now let's see what we want to do. We want to grab the ID from the URL. So we're going to do that in the ng on init. So let's say get ID, and we can do that. Let's put it in this.id inside that property, and then we'll say this.route. Remember, that comes from activated route from the router, and then it has something called snapshot, and then we say dot params. Okay, and then the parameter that we want is the ID. Okay, and that should give us the ID. Now, let's see. You know what? Let's console log this, just to make sure everything is, so far so good. So if we go ahead and F12, and there it is. So there's the client ID. If we go back and let's go to Mary Williams, you can see hers ends in EX. So if I click details, you'll see that we get the correct ID for her, and it's getting logged to the console. But now what we want to do is we want to fetch us that particular client through our service. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll say get client. So it's going to be this.client service, and then we're going to have a function called get client, which we haven't created yet, but we will. Not clients, just client, singular. And that's going to take in this.id. Okay, now this is going to return an observable, so we're going to say subscribe, and let's put our arrow function in here. It's going to give us a client back. And then what do we want to do with that? We want to set this.client equal to the client that we get back. Okay, now this has balance right here. This is initially false, but when we get the client, if the balance is higher than 0, then I want this to be true. All right, and I'm doing this because I want to do a little bit of property binding. So let's check for that. We'll say if the client coming back has a balance. Did I spell that right? Balance. If the client balance is greater than 0, then we want to say this dot has balance is going to be equal to true. Okay, meaning that they owe money, basically. So let's go ahead and save that, and then we're going to create this get client function inside of the service. So let's do that. We'll go into client service, and let's create a function called get client, which takes in an ID, just like that. That's actually going to be a string. And then for get client, this is going to be really easy. All we have to do, all we have to do is say this.client. Remember, we set that to this Firebase object observable. So this.client equals, and then we can say this.af, meaning this right here, the Angular Firebase package. And then it has a function called object. Okay, so in here we want to put our collection, so /clients/ and then the ID. So we just want to concatenate on ID. All right, and we want to get that as a Firebase object observable. Okay, and then we'll give it a type of client. Hopefully that makes sense. And then let's see, we're just going to return this.client, and that'll bring in the individual client into our component. So let's save that, and if we go back to our component here, When we get it, we're just setting it, but let's console log it just to make sure that everything is actually working. So console.log this.client. And there he is. Okay, or she is, Mary Williams. If we go back and we click on John Doe details, and we look down here, you'll see that we're getting all John Doe stuff. So now that we're actually fetching it, we want to move on to display it in the UI. Alright, so let's go to the HTML. So we want client details component HTML. And let's create a row up here. And then let's do a call MD6. Okay, we'll have 2 of those. And I basically just want to link back to the dashboard. So let's put in an A tag with a router link, which will go just to slash. And we'll also give this a class of BTN and BTN link. Alright, and then let's also put an icon in here. So we'll say I, give it a class of FA, and then FA, what is it? FA dash arrow, arrow dash circle dash O dash left. Okay, that's the icon we want, and then we're just going to do, after the I tag here, back to dashboard. So let's check that out. Okay, so we have our link back to the dashboard. Good. So let's see. On this side, we're going to have the edit and the delete button. So I guess we could just throw those in for now. They won't work, but we'll just put them in. So we're going to use a button group here. So we'll create a div with the class of btn-group. And also pull right, because I want it to align to the right. Alright, and then in here, let's create an A tag. And this is going to be a dynamic router link, so we're going to wrap it in brackets and say router link equals, okay, another set of brackets, and it's going to be slash edit dash client, which we haven't created yet. Well, we've created the component, but we haven't got into like the route. We haven't created the route. And then let's see what we're gonna do. Actually, you know what? We should have single quotes in here like that. And then we're gonna just concatenate on the ID like that. All right, and we'll give this A tag a class of BTN. And then BTN secondary. Okay, and this is going to be the edit button. So we also want the delete. So directly under that, let's put in a button. And I'm going to give this a class of BTN and then BTN danger because it's a delete button. Let's also give it a type of button. Okay, and then let's see, the text will just say delete. And then it's going to have a function connected to it. So we'll say parentheses click. So when this is clicked, it's going to call a function called onDeleteClick. Like that. Alright, let's take a look at that, see if it actually renders. Good. So there's our button group. And then we're going to now go underneath this whole row here. Let's put an HR, horizontal rule, and then this is where we want to display the card with all the client info. So let's give a div here with the class of card, and we just want to make sure that there is an actual client before we display any of this. So we're going to do an ngIf and set that to client. Okay, and that's going to just check the client property, which is right here, to make sure that something actually went into it. Alright, so let's see what else we're doing here. Let's go to our HTML, and inside the card div, we're going to have a card header. Let's make that an H3. We'll say card header. Okay, and this H3 is going to be the client's first name and last name. So let's use our string interpolation. We'll say client dot first name, and then this will be client dot last name. Let's just make sure that works. There we go, Steve Smith. Cool. Now we want to do the card block underneath, so div class card block, and let's do a div with the class of row. Okay, and this is going to have an 8 column and a 4 column. So let's say div with the class of call md8, and then underneath let's do a div with the class of call md4. Okay, now in the 8, I'm going to put an H4, and this is going to be the client ID. So let's say client ID, double curly brace, and then we want client. Actually, no, we just want to put in ID. So let's check that. There we go. And then on the other side is where we want to put the client's balance. But I'm actually going to skip that for now because I want to do some property binding with classes and so on. So I'm going to skip that for now, and then we're just going to move down to displaying the email and phone for this client. So let's go back, and we're not going to do anything in here just yet. So we'll say balance goes here, and then let's go under. Let's see, we'll go right here, and then we're going to put a UL with the class of list group, and then let's do an LI with the class of list group item. Oops, that should be dot. So list group item, and let's say contact email, and then we'll set that to double curly brace, and then we want client dot email. And then we're going to do the same thing for the phone number. So let's just copy that. And this one will be contact phone. And we'll get that from client.phone. So let's check that out. And there we go. So I think that's good for now. In the next video, we're going to add the balance here, and we're going to be able to update the client's balance as well. Then we'll move on to being able to delete clients and edit them. Okay, and once we get full CRUD functionality for our clients, we'll implement authentication with Firebase.